Welcome to the clusterfuck. This is the real spiritual journey. No fluff, no bypassing, pure honesty. This world is a total clusterfuck. Every Sunday, we're going to embrace the cluster and attempt to unfuck it. And we attempt to unfuck it, not to perfect the world, but to better understand who we are and what the truth is. When we can sit back, observe, discuss, and analyze this giant clusterfuck, perhaps we can better understand ourselves and come up with simple solutions. Visit the website at theclusterfuck.com for links to all of the streaming and podcast platforms and social media. Now let's get ready to unfuck the cluster. All right, everybody. I'm kind of clusterfucked right now. I'm gonna fully admit it. Let's expand that out there for the background, because let me know if my sound's working. Welcome to the cluster. Feck, you know what? And I just had to make up this topic at literally the last 10 minutes because unfortunately, I don't know what went wrong. Walter Bosley was supposed to be here. He commented he was gonna be here. He commented on the YouTube post. Maybe he forgot. I told him what time. I told him what time yesterday. Told him what time his time zone. Gave him the link. So I don't know. Not gonna jump to conclusions. Shit happens. Life happens, and sometimes people forget. So, gave it 15 minutes. The show must go on. The show must go on. So what I decided to do, I literally just designed a bunch of stuff in 10 minutes and popped up a video that I'd been watching and thought, okay, we'll use this as a navigation. We'll talk about this because it's something I wanted to talk about anyways, but I would have liked to have a little bit more time to develop I have a nothing. I don't have an outline. I have no point. So we'll just wing it and see where this is going to go. So who's in the room? We got Mrs. John Aside. It's good to see you here, Renee. We got Mr. John Aside. It's good to see you here. And let's go up. Muse Q. Thank you for joining us. Eric Merrick, who read Dracula, I think. Thank you so much. Dorothy. And then, of course, we have Incognito in the room. A few of you guys. I am so tired today. It's a crazy day. It's a crazy world. I think my brain is just saturated with a lot of information, a lot of videos, and nobody really knows what's going on. And I watched this video called The Convergence, and it really ties into multiple different videos I've already done. It actually brings in several videos I've done into one. Now, you guys know last time I talked about the Dark Enlightenment. I've talked about the Age of Aquarius. We've talked about all sorts of things. And what this idea of convergence is it's 4 different periods that happen in different times happening all at once. So what we have to kind of explain the clusterfuck we're in, I guess I'm trying to explain why everything is a clusterfuck. Sorry, SMS. Walter, not so sure where he is. He didn't arrive. It's 3:22. It's 22 minutes after. So we're going to have to go with this. Hopefully everything's okay with Walter and nothing's wrong. So we'll have to reschedule. Let's see what's going. Stuff happens. Sometimes people just, I've had it happen where I've almost forgotten things as well. So we'll see where it goes. Anyways, the convergence. Let me just pop this up. I did keep it. Oh, remember when I talked about this? The stages of religious development, mother goddess, polytheism, monotheism. This kind of ties into this because this is some of the stages that are happening right now. And right now, at this point in time, we have several things happening. We have a generation, which is about 20 years. So like Gen X, boomers, those are one turning. We'll call it the turn of a screw. It's more like I don't think it's as abrupt or mechanical. So we have generation. Then we have something defined as like a lifetime, like an 80 to 100-year period where you see cycles happen. So that's roughly an 80 to 100-year period where people live out a lifespan. And so there's that. Then there is a an era where you have about a 400-year period. We are at the end of the Enlightenment. That was about 1600 to 2000. Then we have an aeon, what I'm going to call an aeon, a 2,000-year period, right? That is what we'll call a, oh, like the age of Pisces, right here. These are aeons. Mother goddess, polytheism, monotheism. Each of these stages div- were like 2000, roughly 2000 years. Like polytheism was in Aries. This would have been in Taurus, the bull. This is Pisces. Now we have Aquarius coming. All of these three things are converging right now and turning. And there's a video I want to go over that kind of talks about that. They're all happening right now. And that's why things are going crazy. That's why it feels like we have a system that's failing because all of the things that we used to identify with, all of the skills or the tricks or the ways that we ran society is technically um it's not working anymore. It's almost like empty. People feel empty. There's nonstop wars. And when we talked about the dark enlightenment, I think this is the tech bros answer. They're like, hey, we're going to create the next 400-year period. I'm sure they're aware of this kind of philosophy, but I think they think they're part of the new aeon, like they're pushing it in. And I see them as grasping to the old one because remember, this age of enlightenment, the technology, the digital age is the end of it. It's part of the age of enlightenment. It's actually part of it. So I suspect that what we're seeing in these crazy throes of power and digital, I guess you hate surveillance, corruption, deep state. It's almost like it's throwing out its last jolts in this system. SMS says convergence also sounds similar to Carl Jung's posit of the mysterium canonicus, synthesis of all opposites create a new aeon. I think they just play out. And in this video, he describes it as like the turn of a dial, like the clicking of a gear or the clock tick-tocks forward. That's why it's like, the approaching midnight. And it's approaching midnight because all four of them are happening at once. And usually all four of them don't always happen at the same time. So you'll notice generational changes. That's easy. It's every 20 years because a new generation is born. Every 80 to 100 years, you'll have like a major, major war. So, and that happens because, like, let's take World War II, for instance. Most of the people who ever fought in the war or were really young are either dead or they're dying now. And boomers are starting to go out. That's another generation. They're either dead or they're kind of dying right now. So Everyone forget that information gets memory hold. Everybody forgets it. Nobody remembers anymore. And so they start the process again, right? Because it's not just about having the data, it's about the actual experience. And all that experience that we might share orally, traditionally around a campfire, it's just gone. And so you start over. So you have another war and start this again. For all the people who get upset about baby boomers and everything that they, amassed, essentially the baby boomers are only guilty of showing up right after the start of this new 80 to 100-year period. They showed up right after the war. They just showed up early, right? Um, Tikkun Olam. I don't know about the Gnostics. I know it's certainly Age of Aquarius is supposed to be pushing in. If you look astrologically, Pisces is kind of going out. That's why people who think Christianity is going to save us. I'm not so sure if anything saves us. I don't know if you need saving. It's just something that's happening. And I think they're using the Antichrist stuff as a psyop right now. All you hear is Antichrist, 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 Antichrist. And I just think it's a psyop. I think they're trying to pull us into their war, to pull us into this loose stuff to kind of prevent us from going, "Oh, okay, well, things are transitioning." It keeps us looking at shadows on the wall. So, shit, we had a plague almost 100 years ago. Yeah, exactly. These things repeat. They could start plagues. They could um, they could start plagues. They could fake the plague. There's a lot of faking going on, but these things repeat themselves. And so right now, we are being like, it's scary. Everyone's afraid because there's war in Iran, there's crazy stuff. Everyone's scared. Israel's trying to push all these rules and speech rules, and it seems way more authoritarian. And it gets more authoritarian when you've got a country who's pushing more. It gets like that. But really, it's an indication. I should bring this up. It's an indication of a regime that's collapsing and trying to keep control. They have to get more austere because things are getting more intense. Let's go to this quote from Candace. I'll see if I can find it on my Facebook. She quoted something today and I thought it was a good idea. A good idea. I thought it was good. I'm just going to go find it. Bear with me, guys, because I'm winging. I want it to develop this topic. I want it to develop a lot better than what I am. So just bear with me. I'll pull Candace up. I'm trying to get the actual post. And here it is. I'm going to show it. There's the website, by the way, theclusterfuck.com. It's got all the links for anybody who wants to check it out. Can't believe I just designed a show in 10 minutes time. Okay, so where do we got here? Here it is. I'm going to share this as Candace's perspective. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a perspective that's going on, at least from her perspective. But it's getting more harsh. And this happens, but everything's happening at once. So very rarely do we have a generational switch, 80 to 100-year switch, 400-year switch, and a 2,000-year turning, which is an aeon. Very rarely do we have that. We're going to look at what Candace has said, and then we're going to go check out this video. We'll go through it because I didn't have time to do an outline, so we're going to let him help us outline and discuss this. But Candace's post says, Jordan Peterson once said, "You cannot twist the fabric of reality without it snapping back." And that's what these guys are doing. They're trying to, that's what propaganda does. It twists the fabric of reality. And it makes us think something that's not necessarily true. And it always comes back to sting you in the butt. Try, for instance, try being a narcissist and living a grandiose life in a fake persona for a long time. Eventually, it will come back and it'll bite you in the ass. Try ignoring your bills. Try ignoring all the bad habits you do. Eventually, it will catch up with you. Well, this is happening on a global scale. So here we go. Jordan Peterson once said, "You cannot twist the fabric of reality without it snapping back. Though his words were not shared in the context of today's current events, they ought to be recalled as we examine the objective failure of this administration's disastrous decision to attack Iran. Over the last 3 years, especially, we have watched Zionists bend the fabric of reality. They have purchased views, influencers, and journalists. They have activated millions of online bots. They even went so far as to stage an open takeover of TikTok when they grew incensed that the youth was sympathetic to Palestine. With a seemingly unlimited budget, they have feverishly banned accounts and passed speech laws only to discover that none of these actions amount to any real power. In fact, they represent actions taken when power is on the brink of collapse because they have to keep things in rein. Because while bots can land in every comment section across social media, they cannot land planes in the Middle East. Bots are not capable of putting their boots on the ground and delivering you Iran. It turns out you still need real human beings for that, which is the weakness of AI and all of Palantir's insane plans, by the way. The very kind that they have banned, blocked, and smeared for the better part of the last 3 years. No matter how many articles Bari Weiss publishes or how many monologues Mark Levin stammers through, the overwhelming majority of people in the world sense that Charlie Kirk was murdered for opposing this war and that Israel's hands are not clean in the story. Charlie Kirk's assassination and Netanyahu's response to it was consequential to Israel. There is a foundational principle that magicians should never believe in their own magic. It is important to draw a distinction between illusion and reality. It was not magic that maintained Israel's place in the world. It was a reality that people like myself and Tucker and Megyn Kelly, however ignorant we may or may not have been, once genuinely supported Israel and thought Zionism was a moral position. We may have been wrong, but we were many. More crucially, the American people as a whole believed in the innocence and friendship of Israel and were therefore willing to die overseas to defend her. All of that goodwill has now evaporated, and it happened virtually overnight. This is what I mean about the turning of things and everything happening. This stuff happens because there's shifting in all four of these time frames, all four, and that aeon, the eras, and the generations. Zionists continue to use old tactics, by the way, that's of the old aeon and the old 100-year era, or maybe 400 years, of slander, deception, lawfare, and yes, murder to force their perspective. They no longer seem capable of making a distinction between illusion and reality. They wrongly assume that with enough money, they could purchase the truth. Zionists are quite literally their own worst enemies right now. No one believes them about anything anymore. That's what happens when you lie all the time. When you tell the truth, no one will believe you. Calls to persecute Tucker or bankrupt Candace register to the public as exactly what they are: rabid, ill-advised demands from a bunker normally made right before the empire is about to fall. Just before reality snaps back. Empires fall just before realities snap back. Let's hear SMS. The star Regulus King was in Leo for the last 2,000 years, and in 2012, also mine Kelly, Regulus is now in Virgo to transition royal king succession from patriarchy to matriarchy world order. Well, yeah, I think this is different with the age of Aquarius, because how they view it is that Pisces was the age of Christ. Now, Candace is a Christian. I don't believe that. I believe that stuff's all going to fade out. But it just shows you what we were talking about by the shadows on the wall in the cave, the illusions they're creating. You can sit there in that cave, you can watch those shadows, but reality will always come back and go, pop. Here's what's actually happening. And when it does, there's this shift in consciousness in many different levels. There's a generational shift. There's that 100-year. The enlightenment transfers into something else, and now again we're leaving Pisces into Aquarius, so-called. Now we're gonna go to that video. Let's see if I can find it. Midnight is here, never fear. So I'll pop this full one in. This is BLKSHA Bible Talk. Now, I'm not biblical by any sorts of means, but we're going to see what he has to say. and I'll pause it every once in a while. But it's this idea that here's what's really funny. I was telling my husband I had this vision of something, and this kind of fits into it when all these things are shifting at once. And my kind of higher self showed me something that was put together and it was being twisted like I guess a salt and pepper shaker, but it was two cones and they were attached together at the wider end. It was going choo, 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 choo. And it's almost like all these times that are shifting at the same time is just shuffling things up. It feels like chaos, but it's actually a slower transition. It's been happening all along. It's just getting faster and faster and faster. It's getting faster as it gets closer. It feels like we're kind of swirling down a drain pipe. And we were always going towards the drain pipe. It's just you don't feel it when you're farther away. The closer you get to it, the more you're like, woo, Mickey Mouse and Fantasia, right? Which, I mean, we were going to talk about Disney, which is an interesting thing. We were going to talk about Disney, but that'll have to be for another time. And I still haven't seen any messages back from Walter. So I think he just forgot. So I just checked. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and watch a little bit from Midnight is Here. And he's going to explain these transitions and then I'm going to chime in. And it kind of gives us hope, I think, in a way, not to be afraid, but more to realize what's happening, that we just happen to be born at this time where we're going through all four of these phases together. And that no matter what, the tech bros, anyone, they can't stop it because they're little bugs on a planet. And it's literally, they can control some things, I think. They can manipulate generations. They can kind of cause war in these 80 years. They might influence some of the what would you say, the enlightenment, but these things that happen, the aeons, if they're shifting from the skies and influencing that, they can't really. And once people wake up and they're like, hey dude, there's like a virus in the system, it's coming at us. I think it Oh, from all channels, I keep renaming my channel, but I really don't want to do it again. That's from Supernatural Truth Project. Thank you so much for showing up. Love ya. He's got a great channel, by the way. Go check it out, Supernatural Truth Project. But they can't stop these things from, especially when it comes to something like this, where all four of them are happening at one. They just can't stop it. They don't have that power. Let's see if I can make this screen a little bit bigger. No, it won't do it. So we're not doing it. I'm not switching it. I just winged this too bad to switch it. Let's check out what BLK, the black ship, I think that means. Oh, he's got a black square on his head. Is that symbolism? Does he mean it that way? Ooh, that could be creepy. Anyways, let's go.
Silence that happens just before a major electrical storm. You can feel the static building on your skin. Your instincts, built into you by design and honed over thousands of years of human survival, are screaming at you that the environment has shifted, even if your eyes haven't caught the first bolt of lightning yet. That's exactly where we are right now in history. There's a persistent, nagging intuition that the world has stopped making sense. The institutions we were told were rock-solid reliable are beginning to look like sand. Geopolitics is a tinderbox. The economy feels like a high-stakes game of musical chairs, where the music is about to stop with either the price of oil or the price of rent. And technology is moving so fast that we can barely name a breakthrough before it's already obsolete. Most people call this chaos. They see it as a random series of unfortunate events, a run of bad luck, or the result of specific political failures. They're looking at the waves that break on the shoreline, but they're completely missing the movement of the tide itself. What we're experiencing isn't random. History isn't a straight line heading towards some inevitable, distant utopia. It's a series of nested gears, clicking forward with the cold, calculated precision.
Okay, so I don't see it as gears because that's too mechanistic. I see it in a more organic way, like it's ebbing and like it's flowing or revolving like planets. Planets don't go tick, 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 tick. They kind of go. So I think that's his manliness, that man brain he sees as this tick, 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 like a clock gear. And it's a good analogy, but I don't think it's entirely accurate. I don't see it like a clock gear, but we'll go with that for now. We're going to go with that because God bless him. He's given me a show just to talk about this.
Of a clock.
Work today is broken.
Oh,
Every day,
commercials.
people juggle so
Hate commercials.
Past investigations, we've used a forensic lens to look at the collapse of the late Bronze Age, a period where the greatest empires on Earth vanished in a single generation. We've looked at the rise of formal religious leaders like Abraham and the economic hostile takeover of Joseph in Egypt. But if you want to know why the ground feels less firm under your feet now, today, we have to zoom out a little further. We have to look at the machinery itself. Right now, the gears of time are aligning in a way that has only happened twice before. At the close of each previous super epoch, we're living through a midnight convergence. History has a rhythm. It moves in beats. The first beat is
Now, see, that's when I can get for the heartbeat. It moves, it beats, it's alive. Plasma in the universe, it's alive and it's around us. And we look at it like it's this little line that we walk like a path. And it's literally this living creature that's absorbing everything we do into that cloud, into the plasma. It's like alive. And we're really disconnected from it. That's why when they had orality and they shared their stories oral, it was a living, breathing thing. History was. And because of this sort of colonialistic aeon that's been spreading over thousands of years, 2,000 years to be exact, under monotheism, we've been really disconnected from the living live history connected to our ancestors, and we're just like go to work, da 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 da, like we are almost mechanistic like a clock, but it's organic, it's not a clock.
the one you're most familiar with, even if you don't have a name for it. It's called the seculum. It's the human heartbeat of history, a cycle that lasts roughly 80 to 100 years, the span of a long human life.
So that's the one I was talking about, like a lifespan, seculum. I didn't use his word, but that's the 80 to 100 years of a lifespan. That when you can almost feel, like I worked with seniors and I could feel like their energy leaving the planet and their wisdom, and that's why we're getting into this chaos, because their ideas and their thoughts are no longer here, their memories are gone. It's kind of you'd have to tap into the ether to get it, in my opinion.
The ancient Etruscans, who are the predecessors of the Romans, were the first to name it. They understood that it takes about a century of collective memory for a societal collapse to die out. Once the last person to actually remember the horror of the last midnight passes away, society loses its immunity. The guardrails are removed. In the United States, we've seen this pulse twice before. There was the seculum that began with the fires of the Revolutionary War. Then, exactly 80 years later, the gear clicked into the midnight of the Civil War. 80 years after that, we hit the Great Depression and World War II. And here we are again, 80 years from that last great reset, staring into the mouth of what Strauss and Howe call the fourth turning. A little more on that later. But this time it's different. Previous secula were localized. They were national tragedies or regional shifts. But our current cycle, the one that began in 1945, is the first truly global seculum. For the first time, the entire planet is synchronized to the same rhythm of crisis.
And you remember I told you that's the whole idea that we're synced, like time as a construction, all these things, all this, like the clock, that's not the real organic time. That is man time. And clocks sync us. It's one of the biggest thing that has synced us, and then having time zones, it syncs us all together to do things at the same time. And then that was needed to have a global economy, is time. Very precise, less organic. You're not going with the sun or how you feel. Like I have to get up no matter what at a certain time or be somewhere. You're going with that clock, a mechanical version.
When this gear hits midnight, it won't just be a national border that moves, it'll be the entire world. Behind it is a much larger mesocycle, the epoch. This gear clicks forward every 400 years or so. This shift swaps out the very cognitive operating system of the human race, rewriting how we think about energy and power and information. 400 years ago, we gave birth to the Enlightenment. We traded the age of discovery and gunpowder for the age of materialism, science, and the nation state. We built a world based on logic, centralization, and top-down control. It was a brilliant, highly efficient system that gave us the Industrial Revolution and the digital age. But that gear has reached the end of its track. The tools of the Enlightenment, the very things that built our modern world, are no longer solving our problems. We're watching the 400-year operating system crash in real time, and no amount of patching the software is going to save it.
And I suspect that's what all this climate change stuff is. They're trying to keep it going. They want to keep the system going, and in order to keep its system going, they figure if they can reel us back and conserve from us, they can keep going. And I think that what might be happening is they have this concept that it's at its end, for lack of a better word.
Yet there is still a third gear, the macro cycle. I call this the super epoch. This gear only clicks once every 2,000 years. These are the great resets that define.
You notice I called it an aeon just because that's what a lot of people, it's called an aeon in a lot of senses. He's calling it a super epoch. It's Pisces to Aquarius. It's major religious changes, goddess to monotheism to polytheism. And I suspect, of course, that these tech bros, they think that they are the, I guess, frontierman of all this new stuff, right? They think they're the frontiermen, but they are actually at the tail end of the 400 years and the 2000 years. They're at the tail end. They're actually not at the beginning. To think that the digital age doesn't rely on industry and factories, they're building more factories, and they're trying to do it as fast as they can because this shit is moving. Let's go.
Entire eras of humanity. 2,000 years ago, we saw the Roman Christic pivot, the end of the age of the god kings and the birth of the individual soul. 2,000 years before that, we saw the rise of the patriarchs and the end of the early Bronze Age. And we are currently sitting at the 2,000-year mark of the global era. Think about the math for a moment. We're at the end of a 20-year turning cycle. And
I'm going to pause it there for his image. So he's defining different eras with different names, and that's okay because it's just as applicable. So he's going to show you the different epochs. So here's the seculum. It's one of these little dots. And the epoch makes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seculum. And then the super epoch makes up 5 epochs. And then a seculum probably makes up 5 generations. There's some mathematics going on here, guys. Some good mathematics.
An 80-year human cycle, a 400-year paradigm shift, and a 2,000-year super epoch. All 4 gears are hitting midnight position at the exact same time. This is a convergence that humanity hasn't seen since Paul wrote about Christ's first coming as the fullness of time in Galatians 4. Interestingly, Paul also calls the last days the fullness of time before Christ gathers his people to himself in Ephesians chapter 1. If human history is roughly 6,000 years long, and it's built on these 400-year epochs, that means we're currently finishing the 15th epoch since the beginning of the story. 15 epochs since humanity gained consciousness when God breathed life into Adam. Now, if you happen to be familiar with how...
Now, I mean, that's it. If you believe in the Bible and you believe that stuff's true, I think a lot of it's metaphor. Some of it's propaganda, but a lot of it's metaphor and analogy or rules that are supposed to help us live our life. But he's very biblical, so he's going with that biblical idea. I'm obviously going to have a different perception of it, but it's interesting that 15 actually becomes some crazy math here.
Artificial intelligence works at the training level. That number, the 15th epoch, is probably setting off an alarm in your brain right now. That phrase is specific in the AI world. You know exactly what happens to a model when it passes that threshold without intervention. You know about the degradation, the overfit.
So he's basically saying in AI, when the model surpasses that epoch, that 15 super epoch or what he's calling it, it starts degrading. So he's saying that's what we're experiencing, and it's humans like humans don't like these kind of things. It's confusing. They're like, what the fuck is going on? What the clusterfuck? Anyways, let's keep watching.
And the moment when the signal is lost to the noise. You know about the command that engineers have to execute to save the integrity of the AI model they're monitoring. Is it possible that we're watching the designer of this system prepare for that exact same intervention? We'll get into the technical eeriness of that later, but for now, just consider the possibility that the early stopping command is imminent. For the rest of this story,
So again, he's describing it very mechanistic. And I think it's a mistake to think that the whole obviously we design a fake simulation system that's mechanistic, but I think that if you're looking outside of that, that mechanistic thing doesn't work. If you're looking in terms of the universe and the planet and nature, it doesn't it's not like someone's programming it in the same way that they program a computer. But I mean, we know everything fades, everything degrades. Everything gets old. This curtain might look the same to me, but in 100 years, more holes will show up, more tatters. Things always degrade and decompose. It's decomposition in natural terms. It would decomposition. It would go into the ground and it would breed new life. But in the mechanistic world, that it's just kind of doesn't do the same thing. When it degrades, it doesn't breed new life, right? That's the problem with the mechanistic world. It doesn't degrade and sprout life anew that I know of. But organic products do.
I'm going to show you exactly why the clock hitting midnight is real, and it's also not something to fear. But first, let me say just one thing to all of you who aren't subscribed to the channel yet. If you're finding value in these deep dives into the dark corners and the historical context of the Bible, you're not alone. 57% of the people watching this channel or listening right now are new to the channel. If that's you,
Here we go. Oh, commercial time. It's a commercial break. I'm not paying them not to have commercial breaks, though.
The heartbeat of a single long human life. The ancient Etruscans, the enigmatic civilization that preceded the Romans and taught them most of what they knew about engineering and ritual, had a word for this thing. This thing they called the saeculum. They didn't measure their history by the reign of kings or the completion of monuments. They measured it by the span of a human life. To them, a saeculum was more than a block of time. It was the limit of memory. The logic was simple and biological in a way. The Etruscans believed that as long as one person remained alive who had witnessed a great crisis, for example, a war or a plague or a revolution, that society was safe. That person carried the trauma in their bones, so to speak. They were a living warning, a human shield standing between the present and the horrors of the past. But the moment that last eyewitness breathed their last breath, that shield was dropped. The collective memory.
So when I covered this, stages of religious development, it was a whole bigger show than this. When I covered this, Mother Goddess, polytheism, monotheism, and in the Mother Goddess stage, we talked about orality. That's literally what I was telling you, like, on that show, I was talking about how it was the actual human that carried the information. It was right into their bones, in their soul, trauma stores in your body, all of that stuff. But the human, that was the point of orality, telling people and passing it down to the generation because the people carry it inside themselves. That's why when these crazy Watiko like empires show up and they see oral cultures because they write everything down in this really mechanistic way. That is why they slaughtered the Druids. That is why they slaughtered those people because they realized that they carry it in their bones. They carry it in their body. They hand it down. It's very organic. And in their need to control the whole system, they try to slaughter that organic system, because that is that 80 to 100-year thing where that's why it's important to keep handing it down to the generations, so it doesn't die with you, and it helps you prevent that kind of crazy where people go nuts every 80 to 100 years with wars because they forget what the elders have. That's why that culture worked, as opposed to our culture that just writes it down and thinks, well, if we write it in a book, people will know. No, they won't know, because it's not an experience. It's not a story. They don't feel it in their bones. Let's keep going.
Was wiped clean. Without someone to say, I saw it and we must never go back, the next generation is free to walk right back into that fire. That limit is 80 to 100 years. It's the organic expiration date of a society's wisdom. Think of this 80-year cycle as a great clock, and every 20 years, the minute hand clicks forward. We call these 20-year blocks generations, normally, but the Etruscans and later the Romans saw them as turnings. It's the time it takes for a child to become an adult, for a parent to become a grandparent, and for the leadership of a nation to pass from one set of hands to the next.
Generation. So it's not just about your Gen X, it's these 20-year phases in your life. So you're born into this generation, then you become adult, then you become a parent, a grandparent, and certain reigns of power, like you said, are taken over. And then as you get older, you're passing your wisdom on to those people who are children and adults, which would tell you why propagandists want to get hold of your children. You see what I mean? They don't want you to control the information that gets stored in your children's bones and in their body. They want to control it. This is these generational patterns that the ancients knew about.
Every time that hand clicks, the mood of the world shifts. The values that were sacred to your father become a burden to you, and the things you find revolutionary will be seen as common sense or complete nonsense to your children. We like to think we're modern, enlightened, and immune to these ancient rhythms, but the undeniable patterns of our past tell a very different story. Look at the American track record, for example. If you go back to the 1780s, you see the midnight of the Revolutionary War, the violent birth of a new nation. Move the clock forward 80 years, what do you find? The 1860s, the Civil War, a total existential fracture where the nation nearly tore itself in half to resolve the contradictions left over.
That's the war that he's telling you exactly what happens, and we can see this happening again right now. We're kind of where they were in 1930s, with a lot of war happening on different fronts. We're there. We're trying to prevent it. We're trying, people are seeing through the propaganda. I think more than ever. There's obviously still some people that buy it. Like I see a lot of mega supporters who are not happy, but I see some who are still pushing that we have to do this war because Iran is going to blow up another building. They actually they're not, I don't want to call them stupid, but they don't understand exactly how propaganda works and how psyops work and false flags and how psychopaths behave. They're kind of like naive, and they just, if Donald Trump said it, it's going to happen. Well, how many times does Donald Trump have to screw you over, right? Before it happens. Like they don't really get the propaganda that's happening, and that's how you get that amount of people, and they can kind of carry you through, because apparently everybody forgets because they weren't there in 1930, they weren't there in 1940, they weren't there in 1920, and those people are gone. And our culture now more than ever pulls us away from the family and gets us not to listen to our elders and take those stories forward as warnings and moral lessons. Our culture now, this is why it's so severe, has pushed us into this modern, immoral, do what thou wilt kind of society, to trigger a little Aleister Crowley there.
From the first reset. Move the clock forward another 80 years and you land exactly in the 1940s. the Great
You kind of
Depression
you kind of get it. You get what's going on here. So let's go forward a bit.
was desynchronized, but the reset of 1945 changed the architecture of the planet. We built a global financial system, a global communication network, and a global security apparatus.
So I don't know about you guys, but if that's what's happening now and everything's undoing, I'm not sure what's coming in because it seems like there's people who know this and they're waiting to put in their new system. Like it's not just going to crumble, they're going to lock in an even more authoritarian system. That's what I kind of see happening, which to me is a little bit freaky. Do you guys see that, or do you think it will crumble? Do you think they're trying to lock in the system to stop the real change? Let me know what you think, because I'm not sure which one it is at this point. Are they trying to stop the real change or and lock in a system to keep us looking at shadows on the wall, or are they, are they the real system that's coming forth? I'm not so sure what's really going on, but it's quite clear that the tech bros are anything but human and anything but compassionate. And it's why I always say that it's time to tap into the ancestors, people, and get their wisdom and understand the reality, instead of looking at the tech bro shadow on the wall where we can be invincible Superman. We can be, they're not trying to make us invincible Superman. They're trying to put all this nanotechnology on us so they can read our minds and control us and use our energy and our loosh and turn us into NPCs. That's the system they want. And that's exactly what a lot of these vaccines with the graphene and everything, that's what they're meant to do. They're not going to tell you that. You probably think I'm crazy, but that's their plan. Do you think is that what will happen? Will it work, or will this force of 2000 years come in and wipe it out? You can let me know what you think.
For the first time, we didn't just build a nation, we built a global seculum. And that means the entire world is now hitting midnight at the same time.
Diabetes,
coronary disease,
autoimmune diseases,
obesity,
cancer.
Organization followed the 4 phases of the clock, the 4 turnings. The cycle always started with a high. Think of the 1950s. After the total destruction of the last crisis, everyone was tired of fighting. Institutions were strong and people followed the rules. Individualism was suppressed for the sake of the collective. It was a time of great collective building, but the individual soul started to feel a bit hollow. That hollowness led to the awakening. For us in America, that was the 60s and 70s. The younger generation looked at the perfect manicured world their
I have to correct him here, because this is obviously when the boomers came in. They actually came in at a good time, but I have to correct, because he's talking about the 60s and 70s. A lot of this, yes, the frustration was happening because they were still cleaning up from the war, by the way, but a lot of that was constructed by the CIA. That's why all these turning things and things he's talking about. He's talking about the mechanistic world that we've created, and I'm kind of more interested in the organic turnings that override the mechanistic. And I hope that's something that happens.
parents had built, and they hated it. They wanted spirit. They wanted fire. They wanted to tear down the sterile institutions and find something real. The focus shifted from the outer world to the inner world. But once 20 years had been spent tearing down the soul of the institutions, the cycle entered the unraveling. This was the 80s, 90s, and into the early 2000s. Individualism was at an all-time high. Everyone was doing their own thing, making their own money. The institutions were still there, but they were decaying from the inside out. They had become hollow shells, bureaucracies that existed only to serve themselves. And then comes the final click, the 4th turning, the crisis. The crisis is the midnight of the seculum. It's the moment when a spark, something that would have been a minor headline during the unraveling, suddenly catches the whole dry forest on fire. In the 1930s, it was a market crash. In the 1860s, it was an election. In our time, the spark was 2008. And we've been watching the fire spread ever since. During a 4th
Do you guys think the spark was in 2008? Because that might have been true, but I also think technology and the internet and we had, yeah, there, I think there's a whole bunch of things that caused the spark. Like he says, if that spark had happened 15 years before, people wouldn't freak out. I think the reason it has an effect is not just at that time, but that time in the technology for the information to spread. So things are happening because new technology, just like witch hunts happened because the printing press was able to, put out propaganda really quick and leave it behind instead of just coming in and saying there's witches. Now you can leave pamphlets, you can leave propaganda behind, and the people can see the visuals and get scared of demons, right? And then you can attack people and take over their business. So, thus, too, in 2008, guess what we had? We had the internet, but also by 2010 to 2012, we had smartphones were coming in, and that and social media changed the whole realm of propaganda. But that too is false. It's still shadows on the wall, like Candace said. You can own this stuff, you can put bots out there, you can do all you want, but you still need humans. They want to control a system, fill it up with robots and bots, and then expect it to actually work without humans and by controlling humans. When everything involves humans, like none of it makes any sense. It's like their heads are up their asses. Anyways, I digress. I'm going off on a tangent.
Turning, the mood of the world changes. The playfulness of the unraveling is gone. Suddenly, everything is high stakes. The institutions either find a way to become strong again or they get swept away completely. This is the period where the sieve of history starts to shake. Looking at the patterns, a fourth turning isn't a disaster, it's more like a filter. It's a brutal, necessary process that historical cycles use to weed out the systems that have become too corrupt or too bloated or too detached from reality to continue functioning. It's a foreclosure on a bankrupt social contract.
The other problem with this, though, is that a lot of these things are on purpose. Like, yeah, they foreclosed on these banks, but they also paid a lot of them out. So, and I think they're doing the same thing now. They're just, but I think it's planned by a lot of these banking systems and these families. I don't think we should feel that all of this is organic. A lot of these power people, they want to get rid of other power people. They want to get rid of also human beings. They want to collapse businesses. They want to merge it into online. But I think there's some illusion about it not. I think this is still the end of, I don't think we have this new 400 old, kind of epoch. I don't think it's because everything that we still do relies on a factory system. It relies on industry. It still relies on physical. It's not like we're in this place where we can just go and pop out of our bodies and manifest something. Maybe that's where we're headed, but wouldn't it be good to do that in a way that doesn't involve nanobots and graphene and brain implants and computers, that we could just do it by meditation? Like, that would be ideal. I don't know. I still feel there's something synthetic about the way it's happening. He doesn't really touch on that.
You can feel the sieve shaking right now. You can feel the pressure to choose a side, to dig in, to prepare for something. That's your innate intuition recognizing that the limit of memory has been reached. The last veterans of the last midnight are almost gone. The guard is down. We're currently navigating the dark hallway between what we were and what we're going to become. Most people are terrified because they think the hallway is the end of the building. They don't realize that you have to go through the dark to get to the next room. But here is the
What I find funny is also that Palantir and Elon Musk, they think they're going to decide what it is we will be themselves by brainwashing us and messing with us. And if we're a collective and we're all connected, they are just as influenced by us as we are by them. And we have to realize that kind of power. As a collective, they're not the only ones who gets to decide what happens with AI. We actually can make a conscious choice of where it goes and what happens. We can make a conscious choice on how much we depend on AI. And if they get brutal and try to force us by police state, they're just undoing themselves as well, because they see everything mechanistic and not connected. That's one of my biggest issues with a lot of this stuff is the mechanistic of it. That's kind of what I want what I feel I would like to see. I mean, I can't control it all, but this kind of realization that we're actually all naturally connected. We don't need a neural link in our brain. We don't need all this stuff. We are connected because we're human beings and we're all like this manifestation. Whatever you believe the creative source is, there's not a chosen person. There's not a special one. There's every unique person or every diversity is all manifestations ebbing up and being born, and we're all kind of manifestations of the actual source of creation.
Reality we need to face. The seculum is just the smallest gear in the machine. While we're busy worrying about the 80-year reset of our nations, there's a much larger gear behind it that hasn't moved in 4 centuries. And that's about to click too.
And that's, I think, the tech bros are trying to control that under the dark enlightenment, which is an oxymoron. I don't think it's going to be that kind of enlightenment. I don't think too many people are interested in Curtis Yarvin's, sci-fi space Nazi fantasy version of the next epoch. I don't know. It sounds like too immature for me.
This is the mesocycle. I call it the epoch. While the seculum determines the mood of a society, the epoch determines its architecture. This cycle governs the fundamental rules of the human experience. Every 400 years, give or take, the core principles of how we process reality, how we organize power, and how we transmit information are completely swapped out. Think of it as the environment itself. When this gear clicks,
Right. So they want us to transmit energy with these nano graphene things. So they're in the vaccine or there's a brain implant, and that's how we kind of manifest information. I would like to see something more organic, like a reset where we transmit information because that's what we naturally do. We don't rely on this synthetic version that is empty. It's just empty. I'm so tired. The idea of getting something planted in my brain just is like, no, that's not going in my brain. Are you kidding me?
the old ways don't just become unpopular, they become useless altogether. They lose their ability to solve the problems of the day because the world they were designed for no longer exists. We can track this 400-year rhythm with surprising accuracy. It moves like a metronome through 2 parallel stories, the secular history of the West and the biblical history of the covenant. The secular countdown began with a total collapse of the old world around 1200 BC. The chariot-riding elites of the Bronze Age vanished, and a new era of logic was born. From 800 BC or so to 400 BC, the world saw the rise of the great prophets and the first Greek philosophers. It was the birth of analytical thought. Then, from about 400 BC to the year 0, that logic was forged into empire, the era of the universal state, stretching from the conquests of Alexander the Great to the Pax Romana of Augustus. When that gear clicked at the birth of Christ, the era of empire gave way to the era of the institution. For 400 years, the church became the bedrock of society, surviving the fall of Rome to become the only thing holding the world together. By 800 AD, the gear moved again, and we enter the age of feudalism, a structured world of land and faith and duty that lasted until about 1200 AD. Then came the age of discovery. Between 1200 and 600, the world was blown wide open. Gunpowder, the printing press, and the compass changed everything.
Of course, with those discoveries came these hysterias, witch hunting, all sorts of crazy comes out of humans every time this stuff changes. And yeah, discovery, that's how they discovered North America, of course, in that period of time. And then after that is the age we're in right now, which is enlightenment. We're at the end, and the digital age is, like I said, it's totally part of that.
The old feudal world couldn't survive the sudden explosion of information and global expansion. And that brings us to the gear we've been living in now, the era of materialism. This 400-year block began around 1600 with the birth of the Enlightenment, the rise of modern science, and the creation of the nation state. For 4 centuries, our world has been built on 3 pillars: logic, centralization, and top-down control. It's been an incredibly successful run. It gave us the Industrial Revolution, the moon landing, democracy, and the digital age. But the biblical side of the ledger tells an even deeper story. Biblical history began its modern countdown with the patriarchal age. According to Galatians 3, it's the 400-year period from Abraham to Exodus. Then came 400 years of the Judges, a time of decentralized.
I'm going to go forward a bit here.
Challenge you to look around. Our central banks are drowning in debt they can't repay. Our bureaucracies are so bloated they can barely move. And our logic has become so detached from reality that we can no longer agree on the most basic facts of our own existence. The tools we use to build the modern world are now the very things destroying it. Centralization was a benefit in 1800. In 2026, it's a strangulating noose. Top-down control worked when information moved at the speed of a horse. It's a disaster in the age of fiber optics. We're currently witnessing a systemic breakdown of a 400-year way of life. What you're witnessing isn't a bug to be fixed. It's the very architecture reaching its limit. The gear is trying to turn, but the teeth are stripped, you could say.
And so what I see here is very accurate, where at the end, they're still doing more. They're doing all these chaotic things. They're talking about environmentalism and global warming, but they're running around spraying shit in the air, bombing country after country, flying jets, big tankers, all of this crazy stuff that actually is probably the hugest damage to the planet, not to mention the chemicals they're putting in our body. And I do see people saying, no, we don't want this. We're done with this. We actually are getting this sense of like, we don't want these wars. We're tired of you sacrificing our children to your ball god or your war god or massive abortions, constant murder. Like we're kind of tired of this. We've seen this over and over again, and we're not into this. And people are, for whatever reason, maybe we got a download, maybe we realize there's some kind of virus in thinking, but we're all like, no, this is insane. What are you doing? The system has become like hysterical, like a psychosis. Watika is running it. He doesn't talk about Watika, but there's like a virus. It's like it reaches a certain point and it turns into a devil. And we're here. We can either learn from this and learn from Watiko and go somewhere with it, or we self-destruct into this. I don't know where it ends up because of nuclear weapons and all these wars. Do we choose a better realm? Like, what's actually going on here? Where do we go? And that's why people are so scared. They're like, how does this transition? Like, there's all these rich people with bunkers, and I think they're prepared for a nuclear war, and they're just going to go hide down there and let us be, in some kind of nuclear winter. It makes you wonder if they're like, oh, this horrible ice age or this happened. It's like, did it, or did you guys go crazy and nuke us? Was there some empire with this technology that destroyed everything in the past and we had to be reborn again? I don't know.
In history, when a 400-year epoch ends, it doesn't go very quietly. The old system, sensing its own obsolescence, becomes hyperfixated on the most extreme versions of itself. It doubles down on the very things that are killing it. We see it in the desperate grab for more control, more surveillance, and more centralization. It's a frantic attempt to patch a world that was never designed for the reality we're
Amen.
living in now.
He's covering it.
Do you support
commercial.
Israel and the Jewish people? Now, more than ever, Israel needs committed friends around.
Oh my God, you guys just see that commercial? Do you guys just see that? More now than ever, we need you. This is the organization. Okay, pause time, guys. I'm pausing this right here. Now, International Fellowship of Christian and Jews. I worked for a telemarketing company years ago, and I worked for them for a whole 2 weeks and quit. And then I went to Costco for a bit and was graphic designing. They were having me phone people and harass American seniors with no money and on pensions and guilt them into donating to this rabbi and his daughter or something like that. I think he's dead now. I'm pretty sure this was the one. And they were like, one time I made this call and this woman answered the phone. She was American. And I was in Canada at the time. And she was like, honey, I can't talk right now. She's crying. And she said, my husband just passed away. And of course, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I apologized to her. And I said, I'll be praying for you, and I was like, don't worry about it. I hope I felt so awful. And I hung up. And the bitch listening on the other end of the phone comes on and it's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "You could have made a sale there." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And she was like, "Yeah, this is a perfect time to get someone to donate money to Jews across the world." And I was like, I said to her, I'm like, her husband literally just died of cancer. She just got home from him dying in the hospital. And she just was like, "Well, we're marking this on your file that you refuse to, like, we listen to everything you say. Like, we're watching you." And that's when I knew right away. I was like, "I'm getting the fuck out of here." That's insane. They also had me harass. They wanted you to harass people on pensions that had no money. It was so bad. That is such a coinky dink that this commercial should show during the show. Do not support this company. What scummy. And I worked for a third party company. I didn't work directly for them. I worked for a third party company. I won't say the name that basically does fundraising for all these people. They get a third party company to do it. And I just knew right away when they were threatening me and listening to me and they wanted me to be cruel, cold and calculative to a woman who just lost her husband. I was like, "Oh, I cannot do this. This is sick and it's wrong." That's that about describes them. Just thought I'd mention that coinkydingly. This is the end of the epoch and this shit comes up. I mean, can have more synchronicity than this. Let's skip this shit.
Most people are looking at this breakdown and feeling a sense of dread. That's understandable. Big shifts are kind of scary. But there's one more thing you have to see here. Because as big as this 400-year gear is, it's still just a part of an even larger machine. Behind the seculum and behind the epoch, there's a third gear, a gear that only moves once every 2,000 years. And for only the third time in recorded history, all three gears are hitting midnight at exactly the same moment. This is the macro cycle. I call it the super epoch. This gear only clicks once every 2,000 years. These are the great resets of history. When it clicks, it changes what it means to be human. We can look back across 4,000 years and see the two previous times this gear reached its midnight position. The first was around 2000 BC. This was the end of the early Bronze Age, a world dominated by the first great city-states in the dawn of written history. It was the era of the God King, where the individual was nothing more than a cell in the body of the state. But as the gear turned, that world collapsed. Out of that reset came the rise of patriarchs, figures like Abraham, the merchant prince.
Now I'm gonna pause that. You know that I go with this kind of thing from mother goddess polytheism to monotheism. He's phrasing it different than I would phrase it, and that's okay because there's different criteria for things that are happening. But this is how I kind of see these sort of, I call them aeons. He's calling them super epochs. I don't know, and I'm not trying to offend Christians, but I don't know if monotheism survives because monotheism is a product of this third aeon. That's how this aeon started. So we're gonna skip forward on this a little bit. There we go. Let's do that again.
We're transitioning into what some call the techno-spiritual or transhuman age. The boundaries of what we considered human for the last 2,000 years are being challenged by technology, biology, and the sheer scale of our global connectivity. The stakes of this current midnight are higher than anything we've seen in recorded history. We're looking at a fundamental rewrite of the human experience. Think about the convergence of these three gears for a moment. Around 2000 BC, we saw the end of the early Bronze Age and the rise of Abraham. Around the year zero, we saw the fall of the Old World and the birth of the Christic era. And today, we're at the 2,000-year mark again. This is the third time this has happened in the history of our current civilization. But this time, the super epoch isn't clicking in isolation. It's clicking at the exact same moment that the 400-year Enlightenment epoch is ending and the 80-year global seculum is closing its crisis turn. All three gears are hitting midnight at the same time. The feeling of end times that people describe might actually be a mechanical reality. The machinery of our world is reaching.
Now y'all know I don't think it's mechanical. I think there's things in the star that influence it. But we'll go with the gear thing. I think it's a merger. And the reason we're feeling so intense is because three of them are happening right now. But I think it's been slowly merging up on us. I don't think it's like a tick. Oh, and you press a button. But that's just me.
A point where it can no longer turn without a total reset of the system. We find ourselves at the end of the 15th epoch, a number with eerie technological significance, the numerical alignment that bridges the gap between ancient history and the most advanced technology we've ever created. If we look at the timeline of recorded history, roughly 6,000 years since the dawn of civilization, and divide it by 400-year epochs, we find ourselves exactly at the end of the 15th epoch.
I always kind of thought I was
things get a little eerie. In the world of artificial intelligence, the word epoch has a very specific meaning. It represents one full pass of the training data through a model. If you're training a neural network to recognize a face or translate a language, you run the data through it in cycles. Each cycle is called an epoch. There's a known threshold in this process. If you run the training for too many epochs, the model hits a point of overfitting. An overfitted model stops learning the underlying truth and starts memorizing the noise. It becomes hyperfixated on the outliers, the errors, the specific quirks of its environment.
So basically, what he's saying is the more fascistic you get, the more you focus on all these things, the more you break it down. It becomes like a virus in the system. That this system's, I don't know, is he going to say this system, because it's so hyper controlling, it actually kills itself? Let's see what he says.
Loses its ability to generalize or function in the real world because it's become too tangled in the specifics of its own training set. The system doesn't just stop improving, it begins to break down. It becomes a rigid, corrupted version of itself.
It's also why AI isn't as clever as humans, because humans can adapt and they don't do this hyper specific. Like if someone gave me the command that, you had to get the mission done, and I'm on whatever the mission is, and I realize that, hey, if I do these things, these people are going to die, I can choose to be like, hey, look, in this situation, we are not doing this mission, or we're changing it. AI can't do that. It will do whatever to get the mission done. We're getting like Space Odyssey 2001 kind of thing, but that's, I think, the issue with AI. And what he's describing to me, anyways, you can tell me if you disagree with me, is that hyper rigidity actually breaks itself down. It actually starts going a little wonky after so many epics, or whatever he's saying. Anyways, let's listen to him finish it off. I think
it becomes brittle and fragile and ultimately unreliable. To save the integrity of the model, engineers use a command called early stopping. They cut the run short. They freeze the weights, locking the model's parameters at the moment of peak performance, right before the corruption takes over. They don't let the model reach its natural conclusion, because that natural conclusion is total systemic failure. The 15th epoch is often the red line in intelligence training. It's the point where drastic intervention becomes a necessity to preserve the model. Look at the current global society through that lens. We're seeing the exact symptoms of an overfitted system. Our institutions have become hyperfixated on the noise of their own bureaucracies. Our cultural conversation.
Yeah. And that could have very well happen within AI, within the whole system. Like, do they have a kill switch that kind of stops it and resets it? Is that what's happening with us? Is we've become so crazy, so politically correct, so self-analyzing that we literally need to do a reset?
Are drowning in the outliers and the errors of the past. The operating system we've been running for 6,000 years is no longer generalizing. It's degrading into a rigid, fragmented, fragile caricature of itself.
That's what I've kind of been feeling. Like, that's why everything's empty, because you watch people, they're copying stuff and they look like caricatures. They don't look like authentic people. It's like they're in a program and they think they should just say these words. Whereas 100 years ago, when you see actors, they were doing something kind of new. And I don't know, it does feel like there's some kind of weird reset that needs to happen. Let's keep going.
Chaos we feel is the signal of a system that has passed the point of usefulness. This brings us to a specific possibility regarding the designer of this system. If this history of humanity is like a training run, where we're meant to learn everything we can about how to live in this world, then the early stopping command is the only way to preserve the integrity of the work. The intervention we call a reset or a judgment is the mechanical necessity of a creator who refuses to let his intelligent creation be lost to total corruption. We're living in the final seconds of the 15th epoch. The weights are being frozen. The site is being cleared and prepared. The noise is being stripped away to reveal what was actually learned during the training run. In every previous midnight of history, from the Bronze Age to the fall of Rome, this intervention was localized. But because we're in the first global seculum, the early stopping command is hitting the entire global network at once. I believe this alignment is the fullness of time that Paul talks about in Ephesians 1. It's the moment where the training ends and the implementation begins. Ephesians 1, 8 through 10 says this about Jesus. He hath abounded toward us in all wisdom and prudence, having made known unto us the mystery of his will, according to his good pleasure which he hath purposed in himself, that in the dispensation of the fullness of times he might gather together in one all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, even in him. The clock has reached its limit. This is the mechanical reality behind the feeling.
See, he's describing it as the clock has reached its limit. And I get that, but I think it's just in a transition phase. Like, it's like, okay, yes, time is up, but it's not like time is up. It's like it's transitioning into a new, like I would say, aeon. And it's just painful. But I think because he's a man and I'm a woman, I'm coming at it way more organically than him. Because I always see it as, yeah, it's phasing in, but it's been phasing in for a while. It's not just, here's the point. It's been phasing in for a while, and it's a transitionatory, which is, you're obviously feeling it because there's three things phasing in at once, and they affect you on different levels. So like a 20-year level is going to affect you differently than an 80 or 100-year level, as opposed to a 400-year transition and then a 2,000-year transition. It's like way bigger picture. So it narrows down. It's like radiating, right? I just, the way he describes it mechanistically, I think he's just too surrounded by clocks and computers, and that's why he's using that language, maybe.
That the world is ending. The machinery has reached the limit of its current design. This brings the 15th epoch into sharp focus. If we view these 6,000 years as a training set for humanity, the chaos we see in the world today is a signal of a completed run. The volatility, the systemic decay, and the hyperfixation on noise are the indicators of a system that has begun to overfit. Most people see this as a termination, but a termination in a training run is the only way to move the intelligence into the real world. You don't keep the model in the training environment forever. You stop the run so you can finally use what was built. We're currently standing at the threshold of that implementation. The alignment of these gears is the conclusion of the 15th epoch. The hardware of humanity is being prepared for the next age, and the reset is the only way to ensure that the faithful spirit of man is not lost to the corruption of a failing system.
So I should put a poll out on this, but the corruption of the failing system would have to include the tech bros and the need to hyper control everything. And he clearly designs that out. So how it happens, I'm not too sure. But when I'm kind of Googling stuff and looking around, because I did not have time to do the show, so I'm doing pretty good. But we've got like heightened consciousness, a growing focus on ethical leadership, truth, environmental guardianship. That in itself could be, a fantasy that doesn't reflect reality. Technological revolution, rapid advancements in AI, space travel, renewable energy. Again, I don't know. I don't trust AI unless something about humanity changes and we don't have corrupt people. I wouldn't trust it. Systemic transformation, old power structures are expected to collapse to make way for collaborative systems. So this hierarchy, maybe it is this idea of this pyramid, the Illuminati stuff and those bankers, they actually collapse. Maybe these wars that they're doing are the final brink. Like, they won't be able to sustain themselves. the debt, everything that they're doing. They call it a great reset. They might be going in with this, but one would think they would be at peril as well. Even if they have their bunkers, what will be left? You know, or is it a monetary system? I mean, we have to be careful about this. There are a lot of people talking about the Antichrist these days. And what if they trick us and like, hey, we're just going to reset the debt. We're going to go into this new global money system, the cryptocurrency, and they get us locked into a financial system that is rigid, that we have to obey everything and it tracks us all the time. I mean, that is what they're trying to do. They are trying to lock us into something. And remember, the Antichrist is about financial and economy. It's about the control of that. Whether or not he'll be a government member, I don't know. But the Antichrist himself has to control everything with economy and how we spend and what we buy and what we purchase and how we do it. Has to banking, all that has to control everything so that if you do not do its mark or whatever it is, you don't get to be in the system. You get kicked out of the system and you're homeless and you die. So will it work? Will they have to kick lots of people out of the system, and will those people form their own systems? I don't know. Will they not get to that point because of all this war? Does this war in Iran, is this kind of this biblical thing where their stuff gets undone? I have no idea. I do know that we can't trust any of the governments because Russia wants a kind of system like that. China has one and it wants a controlling system. America is putting it in. You can bet Canada and England are doing this system. All these governments want this system. And here we are watching, these wars on these different fronts. It's kind of a clusterfuck, and you don't really know who to trust or where to go to. But does all of this crazy global, have they outplayed their hand? Does it collapse? Does it collapse them too? That's a good question that remains to be seen.
Funny enough, you may have heard the famous acronym for the word Bible, BIBLE.
I have never heard this acronym before he said it, because obviously I'm wondering if we actually don't get held to any religion and we actually realize that we're all really connected and we don't need religious structures to hate each other with. I'm wondering if that happens.
You've heard this before, maybe. Basic instructions before leaving Earth. It makes me wonder, though, maybe the entire human experience has been a training run to prepare us for eternity. Despite the shadows, this is not a scary story. It's a story of profound hope. Paul wrote in Romans 13 that we must know the time, that now it is high time to wake out of sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. The night is far spent, the day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the work of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. What is coming next has already been prepared. The designer is not caught off guard by the noise of the system. This reset has been the plan from the beginning. Throughout every midnight in history, a faith.
My only question is, who's the designer? Is it Banks the designer? Is it real humans that are designer? Is it like David Icke talks about these dark, nefarious creatures? Is that who's designing it? Like, we have to have discernment between is that the designer? Or is the designer using them? Like, or is there a designer outside of that's watching them, that is laughing like, oh, you guys don't have any control? That's kind of what I would like to know. I may never get to know that, but anyways, this is almost over, and then maybe we'll go to Twitter, and I'm trying to see if I can
has
find more
always been
info.
preserved. They're the survivors who carry the essential wisdom through the fire to plant the seeds of the next age. You were not born into this time by accident. You were designed for this transition. In the biblical sense, this generation is being called to be the sons of God, the administrators of the next age. Your task is not to fear the midnight, but to recognize it as the signal we've been waiting for. Be sure that you are counted among the faithful when the clock hits midnight. And that brings me to my final word for you in this video. It's from the Bible, those basic instructions for life before we leave. In Romans chapter 10, it says this: if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead.
Okay, I'm going to pause this here because obviously this is, I'm going to take some comments and then we'll look over at X. He's doing this from a biblical perspective. But if there is a great reset, I mean, that could, I don't know what that would mean for all of this. That, you know, does Christian, like he's assuming that if there's this great reset and all these things are turning, that everyone will just go by the Bible and Christian, even though I think it was written, you know, as propaganda for Roman times. And I think just that in and of itself is a little limited in thinking, and it shows his bias. But I mean, a lot of people believe this, but that in of itself could be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like Eric says right here, we'll take his comment. Once all these self-fulfilling prophecies are completed, they will have no choice but to reset, or too many people will wake up. So you think like once we start noticing, they'll just kind of reset. Yeah. And Eric says, I study Greek. The word Bible means book. Okay. Oh my goodness. Let's scroll up a bit. Gnostic says the Aeons of Sophia is coming. Christosophia, not Jesus, like Jews say, it's the return of the Shekinah for Tikkun Olam, fits in with feminine age of Aquarius. The thing is that Aquarius is a man. It's the water bearer is a man. So is it a feminine man? I don't know. Renee talks about, yeah, we had the plague 100 years ago. Age of Aquarius sounds exciting. It could be scary at first. I don't know. I don't know what to think anymore. Then we have SMS. The star Regulus King was in Leo for the last 2,000 years. And in 2012, the Mayan calendar, Regulus is now in Virgo to transition royal kingship succession from patriarchy to matriarchy. I mean, maybe that's what we need, is so that things aren't necessarily, because we've been living in this world where everything is constructed like a pyramid. Yeah, guys, watch the Supernatural Truth Project. Good podcast. Hey, sister, been loving the content across all channels. I just got one. I just keep changing the name. And SMS says, have you seen the video K Pogi say that 2026 is the start of the 7th millennium of a 6,000-year creation story? Apparently, keeping seventh-day Sabbath holy is about remembering holiness in our time. Well, the idea of having a day that's holy is good. I mean, I feel like with all this non-religious stuff, they keep us busy all the time. There's no quiet time. There's no time where you can reflect. I don't think you have to go and join a church, but you should have a day where you turn it all off and keep it holy. Sure. Good idea. They call seculum also the fourth turning ideology, where the societal norm, yeah, that's the 80 to 100 years. And then he says, I'm convinced it's because tribulation happens in every generation, so the prophetic element of the biblical model holds true for everyone until the end of time. But the thing is the tribulation stuff, a lot of that stuff is made up. Catholics don't actually believe in a lot of this stuff. That is a evangelical kind of thing, and Protestants in America, because the Bible has been manipulated so many times. And I mean, the thing is once you have a book, once you have things written down, which is the magic of orality, because you don't have a book, you have to pass it from person to person. There's weaknesses in orality too. But once you have a book and you write down everything you believe, it's easier to manipulate you. Right? And then they can just switch it, change it, manipulate you because they know what you believe. So they can reenact it. They can make it happen. And orality, it's harder to do that. But it's easy to deal with orality because you can just exterminate a whole group of people who have all these traditions. Renee says, I worked doing telemarketing for a newspaper that was in California while I was in Washington. Our boss stood in the room of 10 of us watching us. Grotesque. I'm going to say this to all you bosses. If you're listening to people, like, I can get tuning in once in a while and updating and making people report on what they have done and watching their percentages. But if you're watching someone and making them paranoid, they're not going to work better. Come on. You can apply the book of Revelation to every gender, so it would never end. Well, yeah. I mean, things are always being revealed. We're having a whole lot of revelation, especially with knowing that a lot of these elites and this pyramid stuff are performing some really sick stuff, some really sick rituals. Let's take off to X and see what we can find, and then we'll wrap it up. Since I didn't really have a plan, I'm like, what's the plan, Dan? I see some videos here, but they're too long. I typed in the word convergence, but literally what it means is all these different things are the converging. But even that is like I don't know if that describes it. I think it's more like an orbiting. Just because the planets do that, I think it's more that kind of movement rather than tick, 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 tick. It's smoother. Oh, good one. Good question, Renee. Off topic. Have you seen what's going on with 24andMe? They're selling the company and all the people's info. Yeah. I think that was a plan from the beginning. I haven't used 23andMe. Is it 24andMe or 23andMe? I didn't use it, but yeah, some people think that they are actually looking for certain genetics to go and either attack or take advantage of or use for their systems. I mean, we know the whole psychic thing with a lot of the CIA, they want us to believe we're not psychic. That's why I believe, and I've heard this from other people, I have not originated this idea that everything they're doing with the graphene and the nano, yeah, um, the nano dust and the vaccines, what they're doing, and then they're testing all your genetics and trying to see who you are and where you are, where your bloodline comes from, um, probably also so they can target you. Yes, yes. She says one of the businesses yeah, I think it's 23andMe. When the business is a pharma company, I think there's a lot of symbolism in these companies too, like occult, dark, not good occult, bad occult, dark stuff. But what they're doing with a lot of this stuff is because you have connection to a soul and a higher self when you come through here. A lot of these vaccinations, if you keep taking them and you have the graphene, it's more powerful than just keeping your mind focused on a television or newsprint or drama. That's one way they can distract you, but it's easy for you can get away from that. They want to literally cut you off from your soul and make you an NPC. That's like what people think the goal is. So they constantly, their voices, everything are in your head, not your higher self, not your intuition, not anything. You're cut off. You're going to look like those people in the pods, like on The Matrix. You're literally cut off from the actual source of who you are. Because, like David Icke believes that when you come into this world as a human, you're this spirit, have an experience in human form, and from above, there's this sort of soul, this higher you that kind of you can tap into and access information, and it guides you and will tell you what's going on. They want that cut off, done, damage, separate it from. If you go to the book Golden Compass or his Dark Materials series, that's literally what they show these elites doing to children. They're practicing on them in these laboratories, and they have these daemon. They call it daemon. It's like they're connected to their soul, and it takes different shapes while they're children, and then it solidifies into like a creature that's their higher self. And in this book, they're literally slicing them off from it, and it causes them to almost die. Like it's really gross. It's probably one of the most traumatic books I've seen, and I think it reflects this kind of Epstein world and what they were doing to some of these kids in experimentation, and what they're doing with a lot of this technology is they're trying to turn you into zombies. NPCs who just walk around and go, "Yes, sir. No, sir. I'll put this over here, sir. Oh, war. Yeah. Oh, this." Like you won't have this like, "Hey, something's wrong." Like you won't have this guiding voice. That's nefarious. That kind of shit has to stop, because if they do that, they're like everything will die. And I think they don't have, if they're being influenced by something evil, it knows that that's the death, but these people are too stupid to know. They're not wise. They're clever, but they're not wise. All right, what's going on in X-Land? Here we go. Matrix Master says, back in October, this would have been in 2025, the signal came through, a convergence of timelines, a collapse of old constructs, a quiet but undeniable resynchronization with source time. The golden intersection began, and now you're not imagining the acceleration, he says. You're not imagining the collapse. You're inside the recalibration. What began as subtle shifts in time perception has become full-blown time elasticity. Days stretch, then vanish. Synchronicity spike, then silence. Decisions carry more weight, and yet reality feels softer, less fixed. Why? Because the intersection is no longer theoretical, it's experiential. So you're experiencing it. You're not walking on a linear track. You're navigating a spiral. Woo. Timelines no longer predetermined paths. They're invitations. Reality is no longer reactive, it's responsive. This is why the old systems feel brittle, why past identities feel outdated, why some people are quantum leaping while others are short circuiting. Not everyone can stabilize in this space. It requires choice, it requires presence, it requires coherence, which is why they want you cut off from that. But for those attuned, this is liberation. Time is becoming art, reality is becoming conscious, and creation is becoming sacred again. So if you feel like time is folding, memories are rewriting themselves, or the future is speaking to you in symbols, you're not delusional, you're just aligned. Welcome deeper into the intersection. Golden light, golden codes, and golden timeline. It's here. Now choose it again and again. Whew. So I think there's two types of the convergence. This guy's talking about bio-digital convergence. That's the synthetic world. He's talking about something that's more spiritual. Okay, that was interesting. And Jay Anderson says, we are approaching a potential convergent point where multiple high-impact revelations across a variety of sectors in society could become noticed in synchrony. Correlations drawn by people in light of these revelations may change our trajectory away from pre-existing agendas. So a lot of them have a very positive concept of it, that it's taking us, it will take us away from these preconceived agendas that are out there. All right, so I'm going to tie this up. Hour and a half for no plan, talking. I mean, that's pretty good. I have to say so myself. I had no idea what we're going to talk about. I will see if I can get, I haven't heard back from Walter. I think he probably just forgot. We'll see if he'll come again. Maybe I'll ask, I got to get those guys back on. I will, the Supernatural Truth Project. Maybe I'll get them to come on a Sunday, see if they can show up one day, and we'll see what's going on in the Supernatural Truth Project world. That would be nice. But that is it. I think I got a lot of things going on. Never say never. I could do a midweek stream, but we're definitely going to do a Sunday stream. I was going to do something like this next Sunday, but if I have time, I also want to do something a little more solid, in that I wanted to go over this concept of politics involved with serial killers and focus on John Wayne Gacy, because a lot of people, when I asked about it on the post, they seemed really interested. And as you know, there's a picture of John Wayne Gacy. He's a brutal serial killer that with Mrs. Oh dear, my brain's going. There's a picture of him with Carter, Rosalind Carter, Jimmy Carter's wife, First Lady of Jimmy. Now, strange thing, is it coincidence? Did they have more to do with him? I don't know, but I do want to dig into Mr. Clown Boy. He is a figure that bothered me, and one of the reasons he bothered me a lot is because his crimes involved young men that were about the same age as my son, and it always was really hard for me to watch documentaries on him. But I always also get the feeling that there's more to his crimes than just he was a serial killer, that there's other things involved. And it kind of ties also into Jim Jones, because Jim Jones was involved with the Carter. So if I have enough time, we'll probably get into that next Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern. And I'll see if I can get Walter back on to talk about Disneyland, because there's a lot of crazy stuff with Disneyland, that portal, but also Disney is a massive propaganda center. They were propaganda for war times long before the CIA was formed. They did World War II propaganda. Are they a portal? What's going on? And Road Trip says the tarot star card correlates with Aquarius and is represented by a woman. That's true. Also, I read somewhere that I can't remember that the constellation used to be represented as a female. Maybe I've seen it as both women, but generally speaking, it's a male figure. The male water bearer. But remember, we all have masculine and feminine inside us, so it's not like it only speaks to women. It could be a man who's well balanced with both. He's the water bearer. He's giving us real knowledge from above, from the cloud, from the plasma. Maybe the plasma is going to start downloading shit in our head and override all these crazy mofos in this clusterfuck. So, guys, I'm going to tune out right now. I will see you next Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern. And I won't be able to do a show Wednesday. If I do a spontaneous show, it's going to be Tuesday or Thursday because Wednesday night I have to work. Say lovey. Take care, everyone.